Right, we're going. So, to those that have tuned in live and those that are listening retrospectively, I'm looking forward to tonight. We have Sal, who's joining me on as kind of host on tonight's show. And we're just going to kind of share experiences more than anything. This kind of conversation came off the back of one of the last podcasts that we kind of ran, and just after everyone left, Sal and I just started talking, and some really interesting topics kind of came up, because those that do not know, we have both been on some form of, I suppose, lived the fat loss journey. I myself topped out when I was younger about 100. It's in the region of 125 to 128 kilos. So it was heavy, and for those that work in stone, in and around 20 stone. That was not healthy weight. Yes, I successfully played rugby and all the rest of it, but it was not healthy, and there was some really, really poor eating behaviours and kind of unhealthy food decisions that were certainly a part of that. And then Sal, you have also you've also had a similar journey. What was the kind of where did you top out at? What was your kind of heaviest? How old were you? And all this.
My heaviest has been 96 kilograms, which in stone translate to 15 or just over 15 stones.
Yeah.
But for my size, I mean, you can understand it's not a good weight, especially because I'm never trained bodybuilding.
Yeah. And how old were you at that point?
So I think I've been overweight until the age of pretty much my 18s. As soon as I went to my, from between 16 and 18, so that's when I start to sort of like making changes and, see transformation, seeing difference. But until then, I've been always like, let's say overweight.
So thinking back to particularly, I suppose, through your teens and that kind of what is quite a crucial development stage, can you pinpoint reasons? Can you pinpoint foods? Can you pinpoint behaviors of why you were in that situation?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, like I come from like a small family, so we're only me and my sister. And then being born was like when I was born was the only kid. And then my mom is one of those person that doesn't like to say no. Yeah. All right. So and then my granddad used to be a manager in a supermarket. So every time I was coming to visit, it was bringing like bags and bags of all the food, all the treats the kids can could wish for, biscuits, all the like pastries, and then all the sort of stuff, right? And so basically, I had like access to all of the stuff all the time. So I couldn't go before going to sleep. I couldn't have so much crap. It's like whatever I was feeling, I was eating. I didn't have any sort of structure whatsoever. I was eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner plus all day long. Whenever I was like pleased, and I was just like indulging into this, into this food. And then of course, like at some point, I paid the toll for it. I had to pay the price because my weight was just going up, and then at the end, it's like, okay, now it's time to. It's time to stop.
Did you, when you first started? Because I will say that through my kind of process, I've had help in the sense of kind of reframing a few things, which I will definitely touch upon and talk my experience. Have you had any help in terms of anything from a trainer through to eating guidance or anything like that at all?
So in terms of eating guidance, no. In terms of family support, no, really. I had probably more support from my friends back then, and even though I was overweight, but I've always been an active kid. Yeah. So I always done something. That could have been going to the gym, and then I play sports. I play handball for many years. So even though I was overweight, but I always been active. The only problem was then, of course, I was playing sports, but going back home, eat a surplus of calories all the time, every single day. So that, it was always like a dog chasing its tail. So I never got to see any results because of that. I had no backup.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's really kind of looking forward to delving a bit more into it, because it's two really, I suppose, opposite experiences, and it shows that it kind of can be done one of two ways. I will say that particularly with, mine was probably a bit more extreme in the sense that my behaviors it's a kind of a really weird context where I was getting validated with great success playing rugby for being so big, but then was going through huge amounts of really kind of, I suppose, what like I now know to be kind of disordered eating. Not that I had an eating disorder, but a disordered eating patterns. And there is kind of difference between the two of them. And like I say, Sal's done this very informally, which to great success. Whereas I'll be completely honest, and I've been in the sense of I've never really had a kind of a nutrition coach. The main thing that I've kind of done for myself was literally gone down the notion of kind of therapy and other elements just like that. And it really kind of brought up some kind of interesting things, because for me, I always thought, particularly as a kind of, particularly retrospectively, my kind of weight gain started about the age of 11. And coincidentally, or not coincidentally, my parents got divorced at the age of when I was 11. And I know for a fact, because I can remember it, at that time, I did not deal with it well at all. Really, really struggled. And then subsequently, at that time as well, I was in a position where my parents were starting to leave us alone, and they would just be like, I'm just popping out to the shop and all the rest of it, and would just leave us at home. And I'm very privileged. Like I say, my parents would make fantastic nutrient-dense home-cooked meals and stuff. But in those windows of time, even if it was like 10 minutes, I would literally, it'd be like a wad. It'd be like 10 minute AMRAP of food. How much food can you fit into that 10 minutes? And
yes.
And so I always kind of thought this kind of, these were the kind of the trigger points to it. And these kind of things just spiraled, and there became this kind of emotional attachment to food. One of the most interesting things, and this is for kind of that particularly, obviously, this is huge parts of my work now and all the rest of it. But one of the most interesting things that through my process that has evolved, and this is kind of the underpinning of all the coaching that I will do, is that I was adamant that, like I say, these were the reasons, these were the triggers, and I needed to deal with them. But when I actually went and kind of spoke it out and actually had some form of work, so many different things that I just wasn't even aware of came up. And so speaking to someone about it, and having certain types of literally therapy about it, it was like, it was a huge realization was like, this is actually not my fault. And because a huge part of, and I'm sure that you can kind of relate in this, Sal, in the sense of huge part of, particularly within weight gain, when you feel out of control, there's huge amounts of, I can literally remember being in a situation where I'm like, for fuck's sake, like, what am I doing? Or you're looking in the mirror and it's like, for fuck's sake, pull yourself together. And one of the main things is to acknowledge that particularly our brains are a computer hard drive that are programmed from the day we are born. And we're just constantly taking in and formatting these kind of programs that govern our decision making. And one of the things, and I always thought that it was because I didn't deal with this time very well. But like I say, when I went and spoke it out, it was a case of stuff that I just didn't even know, I didn't even compute knew existed, really. Memories in school and all these kind of things that have directly impacted my programming, if you like, to eat like a twat, and for the lack of a better phrase. And so one of the biggest triggers for me is being this kind of notion of, this is not my fault. And that allowed me then to begin a process of starting to be kinder to myself. And self-compassion is something that I will probably say a lot throughout this next 45 minutes or so. But it was important to be like, okay, the programming that govern your decisions has meant that this is not your fault, but it's now your responsibility to deal with it, which is exactly what you have done. You took it on, and then, like I say, it's the similar things in.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's within it all. Has what was it like at the time in terms of, like I say, I spoke about kind of elements of shame, elements of like, just for fuck's sake, frustration and all this kind of stuff. Did you have a similar kind of process, or?
Yeah, I think I was like, it was most noticeable the moment you were going out to buy yourself some, clothing and stuff, because that time was time of like going to school, you want new clothes, you want this, you want that, and then you go into the shop and then you're looking for, say, oh, I like this, I like that, and then you go there, it's like, wow, there's no size. So I felt sometimes like embarrassed on like asking for a size of trousers. Do you know what I mean? Like, you go there, it's like you're looking into the shelf, and then you go through, it's like, oh damn, I have to look at the last pair of jeans or the last pair of trousers at the bottom of a pile. Like, oh man, this is not okay. So things like that. And with time, it kind of like they adapt, and then at some point you kind of like you're full, like the jar is full, and then, as you said, now it's your responsibility now to deal with it. In my case, for example, I would say it's slightly different. It's just, in a way, it's like it's not my fault, because in a way it was my fault, because I was the one eating everything, and like you, like doing AMRAPs or stuff. So how much stuff can I fit into that bowl? Yeah. It's just like fill it up. I think the where I lacked off, it was support from the family, for example. So having maybe having had my family being a little bit more firm with me in that sense. It's like, this is enough. Enough is enough. Maybe it would have changed, definitely would have changed my view of, like the food, and then developing a relationship with food, or because again, starts with that, then, of course, affects the way you look. And then, when we are teenagers, you spend time, now everything's indoor, everything's technology, but back when we were young, when I was a teenager, there was no mobile phone, there was none of that. So your time was out and about all the time, go out and try to find the girls, and then all of this and that. And then I think when you get to the point where all of your friends, find girls, and then you're the one just always looking around. Yeah. And then so all of those things at some point they start to hurt. Yeah. Okay. Because again, we are in that situation where, you're a teenager. It's okay, if I'm not doing something now, I'm going to end up in, I don't know, like awful state, probably at the point where there is no coming back. So that's, I think, where I got a little bit scared. And then I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to make a change.
Has it kind of, from the moment that you started, have you kind of just gone down and maintained it, or have you gone down and back up and then back down?
No, not really. Like, luckily, I've never been in a position where I went back up. So my kind of like weight loss journey went from that 96 kilos into literally in about 3 months, I went down to probably like 80s or something. So I started losing very, very quick.
Yeah.
And then I was at a point where every week I had to go and buy a new pair of jeans, a new pair of trousers, because the size it was going, I needed a smaller size,
Yeah.
So at that point is where I kind of like, I basically decided like, for me, there is no going back. Like, this is worse. I like this. It gave me a lot of strength, gave me a lot of confidence, seeing finally some sort of result, because I took, responsibility of it. And then it's like I acted rather than just like sitting there and find excuses and not to do it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's like I say, because there are so many external influences and people's coping mechanisms are completely different. There are, to like say, one of the most important thing to acknowledge is that we're talking through each of our journeys that will be our perception of our journeys will be completely different. There are for me, there's certain things that kind of have to happen and have to kind of be acknowledged, whether that's nutritional principles, the way we engage in dieting for long-standing success and all the rest of it. And in the process of kind of celebrating progress and results and all the rest of it. What is there a point where you can say, and that you may, and to be honest, like that you may not have even got there yet. Is there some form of kind of like happiness with how you look? At what point did that kind of come about?
Oh, definitely. I think when I was in my 20 finally, and I had my first girlfriend or so, that's kind of like gave me the point of, okay, now I think I got to very good points, and like the scale was kind of backing me up at this time.
Yeah.
Like I think I got like, my lightest I got like subs, around my 73.
Yeah.
From 96. So I lost over like 20 kilos. So, and stones of what would it be? About 3.
Yeah, just under 4 stone.
Yeah, just under 4 stones. Yeah. So definitely when you start seeing in your body shape changing, like things in your life have started to change as well because of it. Let's say find having a relationship, having somebody else's, and then I think those all trigger positive things.
Yeah.
And then yeah, so basically from there there were no way back for me. So definitely not.
I think like one of the main thing is I mean this is a kind of a tagline, and it's really important to have that, to grasp onto that appreciation of your body very early on. Very, very early on, which is not easy, and I will tell you that. But you cannot get the body or performance that you want by hating the body that you have. And
I agree with that. Yes,
it's really, really not the easiest thing to kind of practice in, and requires quote work. But having starting to implement practices that start to create an appreciation of your body, and it's really difficult, and it's because when you're looking in the mirror, for example, or like I was engaging in fitness, I can remember certain fitness tests that I had to do as part of my rugby career, and like dying and
same.
being in a position where I was just like, if you just knuckle down and put together whatever, like I say, it led to these frustrations. But once you start to like just engage in just general practices, which we'll come to at the end, definitely, it certainly starts to kind of flow on from there.
Yes.
I think another thing is this idea of like leading on from that is just trying to build that perception of, particularly going through the time that particularly you and I kind of peaked in terms of our weight.
Yeah.
It's huge social pressures. You're a teenager, you're kind of finding yourself in terms of like say lifestyles, hobbies,
Yeah.
and what kind of path that your life is probably going to take you on, as well as, like you say, the influence of girls and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And one of the things, like, okay, you couldn't really have this conversation maybe with a teenager, but particularly in its application now. One of the biggest kind of turning points for me was I had begun to lose weight, and this was a time when I was at university and all the rest of it, and playing a lot of rugby, like training 3 times a day and basically playing semi-professionally. And I basically had an internship, nutrition internship, and I was invited to do a talk. I was invited to do a talk in front of a small group of bodybuilders. And I was so excited. Now, influencers as such didn't exist at this point.
Yeah.
But these were probably the closest that you could get to influencers. They were, like I say, they had huge profiles and everyone knew who they were. And so I was just super excited that as a budding nutritionist, I got to go and speak to these people. And I said yes. And then in the days before this, I was basically like, no, they're not going to listen to me. They're like, at the time I was about 108 kilos maybe, and it's lost 20 kilos still, but it was just like, I don't want to do this. They're going to think that I'm a joke. These are the kind of some of the leanest people in the country, and who am I standing at 108 kilos, still on my own kind of fat loss journey, going to, like, who am I to tell these people how to eat?
Yes.
And if it wasn't for my girlfriend at the time, I wouldn't have done this talk. She kind of like, she didn't know why I was going through this, but then she convinced me and I did it. And it was, to this day, and I've done a lot of talks, that it was one of the most successful talks and best speaking experiences that I've ever been a part of. And both in every sense, financially, like engagement, like experience, it was fantastic. And this kind of ties back to what is now probably my favorite quote. And there's one, it's a quote by a guy called Charles Cooley, who this was in 1902, and he said, "Today, I am not what I think I am. I am not what you think I am. I am what I think that you think that I am," which is a mess, admittedly, but it creates this idea that we live in a perception of a perception. So if I think that Sal thinks I'm happy, I feel happy. If I think that this girl thinks I'm good looking, then I feel good looking. If I think that she thinks that I'm ugly, then I feel ugly, and all the rest of it. And it's a really dangerous kind of narrative to get into, and one that particularly that I was in. And the kind of the key realization is that what I believe is going on in someone else's head is usually a function of what's going on in my head, because that's all that I know. So if I feel that this boy or girl thinks I'm fat or ugly or whatever, then that's the stuff that's going on in my head, because that's all I've had. I've never been in anyone else's head. And like I say, and it was one of the, probably to this day, like a changing moment, because like I say, these bodybuilders, despite, like, they didn't think that, they had no thoughts. Like, it was one, like I say, they engaged, they asked questions, there's such positive feedback. And And it was just a case of, oh, so everything that I was thinking was purely based off of what I was, purely based off of my own thoughts. And so it begins this process of trying to reframe that and twist that. And this is where this idea of appreciation and compassion and all the rest of it come into it. And we talk about, like say, the power of language, the way we talk to ourselves, the voice that kind of happens in our ears. It is huge. It is really, really huge in that sense. But it's interesting I think it's absolutely fantastic, and it's testament to kind of your journey that you've been able to kind of maintain, like just kind of lose and maintain it.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you can pinpoint that you have that has allowed this to happen? Like, what is it? Is it something within your environment? Is it your support? Is it your personality? What do you kind of?
I think yeah. It's also like, I think the environment changed. You know, going from like school, changing classroom, changing like scenario, changing people. You know, going to study like in a different town. And all of that. So seeing a different sort of like society outside, you know, my own town. So I come from a small town back in Italy, so where basically you know everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was my reality. Okay, so that's why you get to a point where, especially your friends and the people that are surrounding you, they're not really there to judge you because you're overweight or so. You know, no one wants to be rude or tell you, oh, you're fat. They're not going to come to you tell you that. So in a way, you kind of you feel comfortable. Okay. Whether when or things starts to change, you change your school, you change surrounding, changing people, then you start seeing, I think, a different society, and then you kind of like start to put yourself against the new, this new society, and you start looking around a little bit more, and then again, the better like meeting people, you learn a lot from these people, and then a lot of people as well, they come from maybe similar background, they have similar experiences, so you can learn a lot, see how they kind of dealt with it, and then what you can apply to your situation. As I say, for me, it's mainly the fact that, like you've been in sport probably for like many years, handball, and you get to do this fitness test, and it's like, oh my god, I'm dying here, I can't run twice like up and down the pitch, and I'm dead. Yeah. So I really love the sport, and then I really put my heart and soul into it. I played for like over 10 years, so it's a while. And that's why, like, at the beginning it was all fun because I was little, but then as you're growing up, it's like, I really want to get good at this. And then one of the things I had to change was that. So I'm too heavy. If I want to do, to be good, I need to be able to run up and down the pitch. Otherwise I will never be good. So things like that, they kind of helped me out to kind of say, okay, now I have to take action. I have to do something about it.
I think that's a really good point in terms of, and it leads on to, like, to be honest, a whole list of actions that people can engage in throughout the process of kind of weight loss and I suppose body image and all the rest of it. But one of the, like, what you're kind of referring to is basically taking a lot of the emphasis off body composition as a whole, and placing it and attaching it also to performance, or having something else, having another driving purpose. Because if we just get too hung up on the notion of just pinching our body fat and all the rest of it, it's just tiring, it's exhausting.
It is. Especially, I think, sorry to interrupt, especially like in the society where we're now, nowadays we're in, like, the body image is kind of like, I think people that they take that too much as a priority, where it's not. Yeah. It's not a priority. I think, as you said, it takes time to accept your own body. And then, you also, along the process, you have to appreciate what your body can do for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Because again, you can be slightly overweight, you cannot have a 6-pack, but that doesn't mean you're an unhealthy person, or you cannot go out and run, you know, a 5K, or I don't know, lift and heavy weights. You know, this is just an example. Or, you know, feeling good when you're out for dinner with your friends.
Yeah.
You know, you buy a new shirt and then, you know, say, oh, this is now looks good on me. All right, even though I don't have a six pack. So that's why I think people, like you said, they get hang up into that one single thing, and then unless that kind of like, you know, they get at the bottom of it, then nothing else counts. Where the thing is not the case. Like you can't just do that.
No,
because again,
no. I mean, one of my sayings that I say is, no one will turn up at your funeral because you had abs. And
exactly,
like you can have a six pack and still be a twat. And
absolutely,
and no one's going to like you, basically. And so, and this is the thing, and I think the biggest one at the moment is veganism. Like, people are almost defining themselves by their diet, and I will wholeheartedly admit that
I don't want to touch that point.
yeah, I will wholeheartedly admit that, like, I was guilty of this back. So part of my kind of dieting experience was paleo. I did the paleo diet quite successfully, and it became form of my identity. And like, I was like the paleo guy, and I was the weird guy that wouldn't eat bread and all the rest of it. And it was just, and it actually, like I say, so this process of I lost and then started to put on as a result of literally using my diet to, quote, define me and be part of my identity, where it's not. Your nutrition is literally there to serve you and to enhance the quality of your life, in both physiologically from a health point of view, but also kind of spiritually is probably a different way.
I think it's part of who you are as well. Like,
Yeah.
we're all different. So even your nutrition kind of reflects your own, your personality.
Yeah.
And again, like your body is, at the end, is a byproduct of what you're doing, or of you.
Yeah.
Right. So your body's kind of reflect what you are and what you do. Because again, if eating only twice a day makes you feel comfortable when you're sitting around people, then people will feel comfortable around you. They don't care if you eat twice a day, if you eat 6 times a day, like how many calories, if you have a six pack or you don't have a six pack. They don't care.
Yeah.
They care about the person.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I kind of like started to appreciate, because during my like weight loss journey, because once you start seeing a better situation, once you start living a better situation, then there's a lot of improvement. So your mood improves, the way you feel around people improves, and people see that. So people that feel also the benefits of you doing this, certain things.
Yeah.
All right. So it's again, as you said, it's about how you relate and how you see these things.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that I'll put another twist on that, because I had huge, so at this time now, I had huge success in my fat loss. I'd lost the best part of 30 odd kilos, but was still really, really struggling. All this fat loss actually hadn't provided me with much more happiness. I still had insecurities. And one of the main thing is that I was still having desires to kind of engage in the destructive eating behaviors that I had previously. And it was kind of really, really, really difficult, because I was like, why am I still struggling? Why am I still in a position where I am still eating as if I'm 120 whatever kilos? And there's a number of different things that, particularly if anyone's kind of listening to this and kind of struggles, particularly at the moment, with that idea of fighting a battle with like emotional eating, or even this kind of particularly, let's go and make it even more extreme, and binge eating in particular. There's a number of different things in terms of, like I say, that are underpinned by compassion that we can kind of engage in and kind of take confidence from. And so the first thing that and this was really fucking difficult. I will say that, and I will swear, because it is so difficult. But one of the biggest things that, like I say, you can do, particularly because I lived with people at this time and stuff like that, is that I would just communicate it. And this is why I don't have an issue about talking about it now, is because when you communicate something, it normalizes something. And it kind of takes away the stigma from it. It's like why we're talking more and more about male mental health as an example, and it's becoming a much more kind of less taboo subject just because people are talking about it. And the main thing is that when you communicate something, any shame that you have around the area just dissipates. Like shame is one, like, I'm not going to go into it too much in detail, but it cannot exist when you verbalize it, and what a destructive emotion that it is. And like I say, the more so, particularly living with people, if I had anxiety around certain situations, so if my housemate would bring in, would buy a big, I don't know, bag of crisps or whatever, and that would cause me anxiety, like I would communicate that. Obviously, I'm not going to tell him not to buy it because it's free will. But then at the same time, just kind of verbalizing it, and him particularly being quite accepting of that, just help manage the situation so much better. And then that has then transcended into like other areas. So for other relationships with friends and like romantic relationships that I've had in the past. And so speaking about it is huge, because we cannot just expect, it's not always a case of you lose weight and your behaviors just kind of
change,
decrease in the same moment. And one of the other things is that these kind of moments of struggle, it's so important to kind of reflect and unpack them. And this is, again, something that does take some work. And this kind of ties into what I was talking about with JJ and habit building and this idea of having some form of journaling. But one of the biggest things for me, and still to this day, was the sense of, because I was like, why am I still fighting this battle? Why am I still having these negative thoughts? But then when I took a step back, I was like, actually, yes, I'm having these thoughts, but what they are not doing is that they are not manifesting themselves into behaviors. So yes, I'm thinking I want to eat like a twat, but I'm not eating like a twat. And so you have to then take confidence from that, and then trust yourself. Trust yourself, and start to kind of expose yourself to this.
That's the thing that takes time. Yeah, you have to nurture that, and then like from small steps. And that could be, it could be anything. Now we always talk about like, especially like fat loss in these days, but not necessarily has to be related to to fat loss. Could be anything. There could be tons of reasons why people want to change the way they look or so. So that could be, adding on more weight, for example.
Yeah.
Because even sometimes that people don't think about it. It's like, maybe if you try to eat a little more, your body composition will look, will improve. And then the thing that like what you have in mind about losing weight is actually about gaining weight.
Yeah.
Does it make sense? So those things I think are very are difficult to accept, because all we know, like if you don't have any support, that's all we know is that, oh yeah, I need to get skinny, I need to eat less. That's not the case. And that's what I think, well, you definitely see a lot of this, that it's one of those big the biggest misconceptions, that people stop eating, or they start developing in bad relationship with certain type of food, whether it's not healthy, like, because it's something that is not sustainable in a long run. So that's why I think I found my balance during my journey. It's okay, I gave myself like a bit more structure. I said, I know I gotta eat at this time, I'm gonna stop eating at this time, because these are bad habits, and this is what got me to a bad point. So I kind of like start taking away a few things. And then once I was settled into those new things, then I could have focused on something else. but I took my time, so I wasn't in a rush, but I was happy. Then I took action, and then I kind of slowly implemented things, and then they got me to a point that was like, okay, now I'm happy.
Yeah.
Like now, yeah. So, but of course, it's not something that you can deal with in 3 months, 6 months. So for me, last years, for you, I'm sure that it's been the same.
Yeah.
So you got to embrace that process, and then, as you said, like, you got to trust yourself, knowing that you are capable of do bigger things and better things, and then just embrace the whole experience.
Yeah, definitely. You've brought up some real kind of, well, two things that I've just kind of picked out of there, that I definitely am keen to kind of ask you about. The first one is just kind of sharing my own experience, and it's kind of like this attachment to scale weight, and particularly seeing, and we're not going to kind of delve too much into scale weight because we're actually going to talk about that in the next one, on Thursday. But one of the things that we kind of see a lot in a lot of people is that we have this idea of, okay, so Sal got to this weight, he got to 73 kilos, felt and looked fantastic. And then for whatever reason, life happens and they put weight on again. And then say 5 years later, you decide that you need to start losing weight again. And so we've had some element of, quote, rebound, which is actually, to some extent, providing that it's not all the way back through, is fairly normal. However, but what we then do is we attribute this kind of feeling of happiness to this number. And this is one of the most problematic things. And it's just in the sense that if you have dieted before and had success, and then are in a position where maybe you need to diet again, is that I cannot urge you enough to engage in that process with no attachment to your previous scale weight. Because say if we use this example of 5 years that has been a kind of systematic weight gain, through those 5 years, you've done a lot. You have eaten a shed ton amount of protein. So, and every time you eat protein to a certain point, you then stimulate this muscle protein synthesis response, which will change over time your whole composition. Your body is ever changing. And then as well as that, you may have still gone to the gym, and you may have still, okay, maybe your diet was a bit out of control and you did put on a bit of body fat, but you've still done a shed ton of reps. And so there are so many lifestyle variables that will cause this idea of recomposition. And yes, your diet may have caused you to put on body fat. Cool. But go into your next diet not attaching you. I need to get to 73. I need to get to 73.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, you might get to 77 and look even freaking better.
Yeah.
Even freaking better. And it's one of the most problematic things that particularly those who are maybe having to diet for a second time, that we kind of see having to, that we see happening.
That's pretty much, I mean, you've been following me now for a while. So that's pretty much where my body's kind of sitting now, like around the 76, 77. I went up to, almost 80 kilos. But again, I wasn't concerned, or was like, oh my God, what is going on? Yeah. No, because I now knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
So I felt safe in that way, in that sense.
Yeah.
Because, okay, it's now I'm doing this because of this, because again, I want to improve my performance, want to lift more weight. So now is a phase for me that it's okay to have that extra bit of weight. But then I know then I can go back to where my body kind of feels okay at any time, at any point, without, that much of a struggle.
Yeah.
And then, and I think just like it's a matter of accepting that, and that's it. And then the whole process will feel also a lot nicer, a lot better. And then mentally, I think you feel far less pressure on you.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll like I say, we will explore this in massive detail. The whole next P10 show is all on scale weight. but just your scale, the scales is literally your relationship with gravity, and that is it. One of the things that you touched upon as well is that you said that you identify one of the things that you now trust yourself with, is that you then have implemented certain structures to counteract the kind of the destructive or detrimental behaviors. What kind of structures did you have you implemented? What have you played around with? What's worked for you?
So basically, I kind of stopped eating at like odd time. Like I was doing before when I was kids. Like I was, even before going to bed, I was maybe having like half a pack of of biscuits or things like that. Like I would just eat, or a bag of crisps before going to bed. And then in the morning you wake up and you have, because again, like from our culture, we don't really have a healthy breakfast. For us, breakfast is cappuccino and croissant or like sweets. So you eat sweet stuff. But for me, like having sweets meant having like half a pack of biscuit into a bowl of milk. I was putting in so much, and then sometimes it turned into a paste. So disgusting, exactly. So I was at that point. So I was just eating out of control, whatever I fancy. For me, it was just a matter of like opening the cupboard, and then everything was there. So, happy days.
Yeah.
So I kind of like the first thing to stop doing was exactly that. It's okay, because I knew I was, it was absolute shit what I was doing. and then also I think was the easiest bit to kind of like eliminate.
Yeah.
All right. Because again, I already had the kind of like feeling, felt guilty about doing that, even though I loved it. But at the same time, you finish that bowl, it's like, oh man, I had so much stuff, and that was like the easiest things to kind of like get rid of. And sort of kind of like by doing this like things and changes, I was at the point where I was eating what my mom was cooking, and that was it. So freshly cooked meals from mom. That was it. Yeah, and stop eating all those like bags of crisps and then bags of biscuits or all the crap like you can buy at a cafe or in a bar. So I just stopped that. Of course, I was having my social life with my friends, going out, having a drink, and going out for pizza. But I was, I think I developed more. I was more mindful of what I was doing and how much of it I was doing in a week or in a weekend. So it's okay if I want to go out for pizza and beer tonight with with my friends and having an aperitif with it, and then I'm gonna have maybe a little less at home, so I can have my a bigger pizza and I can have like a beer and a drink.
Yeah. I think you brought up a really interesting point, because it's almost too simple. But I think that particularly in the sense that when people try and start to diet, they get hung up on like macros and certain amount of whatever. But then we generally just underestimate the power of consistency. And I say that calories are king, but behaviors, your eating behaviors are queen, and we all know that females run the show. And so if your behaviors are really, really poor, then we're not going to create long-standing success. And so one of the things, like particularly in the context of talking through our experiences around essentially binging, one of the things that you can do, and I spoke about this kind of how to manage nutrition in terms of this whole lockdown period and having food available, is just eat, not to binge. Eat, not to snack. And so if you start to create habits where you just, okay, well, I'm going to eat consistently and I'm going to just have systematic meals throughout the day, and it kind of aligns yourself, like from a physiological point of view, for aligning kind of the hunger signaling hormones to trigger at the same time. It then, like I say, starts to create these kind of
some structure, yeah.
Structure, and that's exactly it that we can then conform to, and it then leads us on to habits and all the rest of it. And like I say, people if we go back to the kind of literally the law of thermodynamics, in the sense, if you have a 200-300 calorie deficit for 5 days, well done. Like, that's pretty good. That's 1,500
calories.
But then there is, you can, like, and I know, like, you can wipe that 1,500 calorie deficit out. You can wipe out a week's worth of hard work in
Easy.
one meal. Like Sal was talking about, like, biscuits. Like, I would literally go through a Pyrex bowl of crunchy nut cornflakes in one go.
Wow.
And all the rest, and you can literally just wipe it out. And so,
yes.
don't get hung up on like specific calorie numbers. Just get your consistency and your behaviors in line. Just get your behaviors in line. One of the other things in terms of, particularly, and we kind of we again touched upon this in the habits one, in the sense that, and you and Sal said this, it takes time. This is a process that is ongoing, and when you look to change behaviors, you can expect to mess up. You can expect to relapse. Like, it happens. And we've spoken about kind of unpacking the process. We've spoken about unpacking the process as well. But I also think that, look at how you can reframe a process, reframe the experience, for example. So say if, like I say, right now, or maybe not right now, but say if you end up having overeating, and like I say, there shouldn't be any attachment to guilt with that. But instead of being like, oh, Jesus, I feel a bit lethargic, I've overeaten and all the rest of it. Well, how can we reframe that? Can we look at saying, well, actually, I've got maybe a bit more calories, so I'm going to train a lot better this week. Or, okay, yes, I did overeat, but I had the most amazing time with my friend, or I really appreciated that food, or yes, I ate that food, but I haven't had it in ages. And starting to engage in this kind of thing is completely necessary. It's completely necessary in that sense.
I think the one thing I noticed, especially in a society like London, I'm not really like a city guy, but what happens here is that we are not spending enough time. We're not doing enough things for ourselves.
Yeah.
And that one thing could be, as you said, like, you're feeling guilty if you're dieting, but that Saturday evening you go out and have a pizza with your friends, and then you're ending up having an average evening. You haven't enjoyed the company of your friends. You haven't enjoyed your meal because you felt guilty, and then maybe you wanted a pizza, but you went for a bowl of salads, which you like is not what you wanted.
No.
So I'm one of those, is like, if I go to a place to eat, if I go to a restaurant and eat and have a bad experience, that will affect me the whole evening. So like, I hate having a bad experience with food, because again, I see food now as something that I enjoy. I want to enjoy. It's time for myself, and I'm sitting there and cutting time away for me.
Yeah.
So it's my time. It's like going to the gym. Is that hour of your time? That is for you to enjoy. So you got to make the most out of it. Yeah, and as you say, if it happens and you go slightly over with your numbers, then who cares? Yeah. Like, it's just a matter of saying, okay, what can I do now? Instead of like feeling guilty and miserable, it's like, okay, tomorrow morning I decided to rest, but maybe I pop to the class, I go to the class and then see my mates and then do some fitness. Yeah. Job done. And that simple thing.
Yeah, completely. Reframing the experience. And it's so important to acknowledge, like, food enhances social experience. Food is a huge part of our social experience, and it will literally make our experiences better. We will literally have a much more enjoyable time if you can come in and say, well, bloody hell, that was a good meal, and and it will make your time with friends better. I always just get people to ask themselves, before they make a decision, is this food going to nourish me? Is this food going to first and foremost nourish me from like a physiological point of view? Is it going to provide me with the micronutrients and the macronutrients that are going to serve my health, for example? However, on the flip side of that, I also say, is this going to nourish my soul? Is this going to nourish my soul? And from a point of view of, is this going to literally make me feel better? Am I going to enjoy this? And is this going to create a better experience within this moment? If you answer yes to that, then there is no food that is off limits. There's no food off limits anyway, but certainly in that moment, there is no foods that is kind of off bounds in that sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's all, at the end of the day, I think it's all a matter of like balance.
Exactly.
Right, because again, you can have these things. I don't think you have to kind of like deprive yourself from those things, because again, if that's who you are, it's like, I like crisps, then have your crisps, as long as you're not having a bag every single day. That's, you just got to be mindful, but not like, you got to have that, because otherwise that person is not you. And then if you feel moody, or if you starts to change, then people around you, they start to change as well, because they see these changes, and they know, especially if you're close friends or so, they know that person is not you. And then again, unless you speak it out, you say, like, no one can read your mind and say, oh, what is going on?
Yeah.
Right. It could be the simple things, like you always deprive yourself from having your favorite meal, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the, I suppose, just kind of as well, like you say, it all fundamentally, particularly through this whole process, it comes down to what we were talking about, like the power of language, the way in terms of which we kind of communicate in our own heads about ourselves and about our experiences. And it goes for like workouts, in the sense of, this is so hard, this is so shit, this is so whatever. Well, can you reframe that in some ways? And there'll be times where you won't be able to, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But for the most part, if you're turning up, I can remember towards the end of my rugby career, as an example, when I was out of my depth, and it was like turning up, and I used to have to brace myself to go to war every single day. And it was just training. And it's the same thing in the sense of when you're engaging in a diet. And that was the narrative that I was telling myself, that I was out of my depth, I wasn't capable. And in hindsight, there was some element of truth to that, but that I could have made that experience so much more positive if I controlled the narrative in my head a bit better. And one of my, again, because I'm a fiend for a quote, is that this is one by Gandhi, and he says, when you think, when what you think, what you say, and what you do are aligned, then you experience harmony. And if you can, and it starts with what you think, and then that becomes our actions, and then it just starts to create a much more fluid process in that sense.
Absolutely.
And it's really, 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 really important. And I think one of the final things that and that you've kind of touched upon already, is that there's some element, and I can vouch for this, of just accepting weight gain. Understanding that weight gain is normal. Usually it's called winter and summer. But then in the sense that also, I always refer it into the 4 Fs, that we've only got a certain amount of energy to invest in our fitness, our food, our finance, and our faith. And faith being kind of connections, relationships, social life, that type of thing. And if I am going to invest more energy in a new relationship, as an example, it's probably going to compromise some area, one of the others. And it is very rare that you find this kind of point of equilibrium where you just sit and it's very balanced, and you're just dividing equal energy between your fitness, your time at the gym, your management of your nutrition, your finance, your kind of work and all that kind of stuff, and then your relationships. And what was more likely to happen is that it kind of just transfers, like the weight shifts towards, so right now, hopefully in this lockdown, people are maybe putting a bit more emphasis on their maybe relationships, or they're maybe engaging, maybe people are engaging a bit more in cooking or their fitness because they have the time available to. But then when we go back into work, it's probably going to, like, these things are going to have to take a step back and all these kind of stuff. And so
that's why I think that, now I think people have to take the opportunity, like see this experience for as much as it sucks, to kind of like, and to live a little bit more like in a positive way, because kind of now you're kind of forced to have time for yourself, whether like when the whole world is going to restart again, then you're going to chase your tail, you're going to go full on all the time, every single day. And then I think you might end up even missing these days where it's like, oh, I'm actually home, I was cooking my meals 3 times a day, those situations where like they're a bit of a luxury to have. Like, I think we will appreciate more this time. And hopefully, I don't know, with the moving into the future, you will, when you're spending time at home, you'll be, a lot more productive. And then you will use that time probably again for yourself, dedicate that time to yourself.
Yeah, already, like I say, I just hope this will teach people to slow down, to kind of evaluate the balance that they have and all the rest of it. It's completely right. I will just open it up for questions. Sanjay's becoming a professional Netflix watcher.
Professional Netflix watcher.
If there are any questions, any comments, then please just let us know. We'll kind of answer them. Any thoughts, anything that's specific to you, we'll answer. We'll give you kind of 2 minutes to just kind of put that in now. But other than that, have you got anything else to add, Sal?
No, I think pretty much that's it. Like, that's
Is it the main, and like I say, the main point is that it requires time, patience, and just repetition. As with anything, it requires repetition, and I cannot. But then the importance of repetition is huge, and like I say, to just expect yourself to kind of be a bit more compassionate with yourself. To apply that context just doesn't happen overnight.
Because also, it's a very fine line between say self-compassion and actually making it into a bad behavior at the same time, because you can say, oh yeah, that's fine. Oh yeah, that's fine. No, it's not fine. It's a treat. But I remember back in a few years ago when all this paleo diet was in fashion. I've done it for a while as well. It didn't work for me. I mean, it was. I mean, what it comes with it. You have to eat like so much stuff in order to keep up with your like having some food. But I tried. And then everyone was using sort of the excuse of baking those like paleo cake, paleo treats, because but this is paleo. Yeah, but that doesn't mean it's okay to eat every day or having like half a cake all the time. It's still a cake.
Yes.
It's still a treat. It's just maybe less, less bad than in a supermarket cake, but it's still a cake. Yeah. And then, like nowadays that, this paleo thing is more the vegan things. I was like, but it's vegan. But it's vegan. Yeah, but that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean that because it's vegan is healthier. Yeah. It could be absolute crap if the list of ingredients is that long. And then your food you're eating is vegan, but it's not great either.
There's no food or food group in isolation that make you fat. It is consistency of.
Exactly. I always put it in a way like more than a nutrition into a program, like a fitness program. You can have the best fitness program in the world, down for the best training in the world. But if you're not doing consistently, that program won't deliver anything.
Yeah.
Even though it's the best program you can get on the planet. If you're not willing to.
No, go on.
No. As I say, like you're not willing to do that program consistently, you never get any results.
Yeah.
But that applies to pretty much anything.
No, it's definitely. There are a couple of questions that have come in. Silk has just asked, Callum, isn't being so actively busy with nutrition tough for my own journey? I find the more that I think of food, the worse I'm off. I'm going to say that in the beginning, I really, really struggled. And particularly years ago, yeah, completely. Because because I deal with people's struggles around food, it would then trigger my struggles around food. And 100%. Now, that's not the case so much anymore. For a variety of different reasons. So one of the things that I don't do as a result is that I do not track my food. That's the first thing that I do not do, and really try and implement elements of intuitive eating for the most part. Don't get me wrong, I am very aware of, like, I can tell you that there are 557 calories in a half a chicken in Nando's with 90 grams of protein and all this kind of stuff. So I'm very aware in that sense. However, I don't track my food. The other thing is that, like I say, it's just this case of repetition. And like, I've acknowledged that exact trend of people triggering that, and then have had to work at that, go through the repetition, go through, right, okay, well, what happens when someone does trigger me, and then or did trigger me as such, and then how do I then pull myself out of that? And then that comes through the stuff that JJ and I spoke about in terms of engaging in that kind of reflective practice. And then once I've kind of called myself out in hindsight, whereas I didn't really deal with that situation very well and it was unnecessary, I then developed strategies to then just pull myself out of it. So if I was to think, well, actually, do I actually want that now? I'm able, or I want to overeat, I want to do this, I'm able just to kind of snap back out of it in that sense. But that's taken time and work, but I completely get with that. Mose asked, how do you get over the frustration, for example, that one meal removes the deficit you had over 1-2 weeks and you have to start all over again? From a scale perspective as well. Do you have anything with that? I know I have, plenty of answers with that, but do you have anything, Sam?
In a way, I think I have. So, as I say, I think to completely remove the deficit from that you had over like 1 or 2 weeks, that meal must be like huge. Also, I think on basically only on scale weight, that number won't mean anything, because in 1-2 weeks, a lot of things have changed. Like, you're not weighting yourself on the same day in the same situation. You might have been a lot more stressful work. You've been, like a lot, like the situation is completely different. And then even though your body might, is the same, then because you're being stressed or you had like completely, horrible week or whatever, then on that day you kind of weighing yourself is like, oh my God, what happened? Whether like in substance or nothing happened.
Yeah, no, definitely. I will add to that in the sense of, so using scales as a metrics in that sense can be really damaging. So for example, so if we store carbohydrate in our muscles and our liver, and we have, probably the average person has the capacity to store 500 grams, okay, 500 grams. Now, if you then are in a depleted state of some sort, and we'll all kind of operate at a slightly depleted state depending on our average carbohydrate intake, we'll then top up those body stores. So you have the potential to put on, to fill your body stores up, which is 500 grams right there. And then for every 1 gram of carbohydrate that you consume, 3 grams of water attaches itself to that. And so there you have 500 grams of carbohydrate, or glycogen as it's called, that's stored in the body, with 3 grams per time. So 500 times 3 is 1.5 kilos. you have 2 kilos of weight that is in your body now that is not fat. And that's the kind of the idea in terms of using scales. Now, in terms of the deficit, in terms of from the week, people think about it too small. You are a sum of your averages, but your averages, your average calorie intake, my body composition in this moment is the sum of my average over the past 3 months. You can manage a deficit over a much longer period of time. And if people are thinking about it in, oh, I've not really had a good week, well, tell me how your month's been. Tell me how your month's been, and then we'll talk. Because it's such a more productive way to go about it. You're telling me, like in your birthday week, that or even for some people, it's their birthday month, that they're that they're going to be, like I say, it's going to be managed really, really well. No, but like that's not an excuse. Your birthday is not an excuse to put on body fat. Now, do calories count on your birthday? No, of course they don't. But then that's, like I say, it's managed to go through there. Sarah's brought up a fantastic point. You quantify your success with your weight losses, scale weight, but then, like I say, have kind of demonizing the use of scale weight, which is a very, very fantastic point. It probably will be discussed in the next episode. However, what I will say is that first and foremost, when there is extreme fat loss or a need for fat loss with that, there is a correlation between scale weight loss and fat loss. So that's the first thing. However, throughout the process, and I think Sal's kind of touched upon this as well, is that the emphasis on scale weight becomes less and less and less. And yeah, it is a driving factor, but then it's not, I would just argue that it's not a point that scale weight is not important. It is important. But when the problem is that when people use it so much to a point where they are missing out on the actual other important stuff, the things like their energy levels, how their clothes are fitting, like their sex drive, their appetite control, their performance, and and then so you can throw scale weight into that, but then you still have to have equal emphasis on all of them. And that's another thing that I would probably add to that.
Yeah, and also, I think you need some sort of data as well as you go, just to see, if what you're doing is actually doing something or not. So as Callum said, like as long as it's not becoming an obsession to just like, oh my god, like every single day on a scale. Like, no, you don't really need to be on a scale every single day. But it's also important to kind of like keep an eye on what your body's doing, where your body's at. So in order for you to make changes or tweaks in your plan or whatever. So I think it's important to have data.
Yeah, like I say, scale weight we know is important. Does it define?
But it's not everything.
No, it's not everything, and you are completely right in that sense. But then it's being able to rationalize it and say, like I say, why the scale weight fluctuations happen, but then also making sure that you still attribute and define your success by the other things, and it's an amazing point. Last one, how do you keep motivated in a fat loss journey if you appreciated your body along the way? This is something that I have struggled with. Have you got anything with that, Sal?
Well, I think you basically give yourself an answer in a way. It's like, if you like the way you are, then you like the way you are. So there is not a number then people can put on and say, oh, this is how much you have to weigh, or that sort of things. I think if nowadays I think it's because the society is very influenced a lot. Okay, everyone says, oh, you need to look like this, you need to look like this. No, there is not a standard where it's like how you have to look. All right, because again, I didn't like the way I look when I was that heavy, but I started to kind of appreciate my body as I went through the process. And then, you get to a point, I could go, maybe at the 70 kilos, but maybe, and even when I was 73, I didn't really like my body. Like Callum says, like, yeah, I lost that weight, but that didn't mean that I was happy about it. Probably I was even, for my liking, it was almost a little bit too skinny at that point. Right. So I kind of go to the other side, and then now kind of like my body found a balance where I know I'm happy if I'm sitting within this, like 76 or 77 kilo weights. That's where my body loves to be, and I'm feeling good. I train well, and my energy is good. My clothes they fit good. So there's a lot of benefit that come with it.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think
I will add that just a reference in the sense of can completely relate from a point of view of like even just in general life. And I'll reference a fantastic podcast done by a guy called Tim Ferriss. And on this particular episode, because we talk about this idea of wanting more, striving for more, and that can come in other areas in terms of our performance or our professional life or all the rest of it. And wanting more and having some form of kind of acceptance of where we are, they are two things that contradict each other. It's very easy to be like, yeah, I'm happy where it's impossible to be, I'm happy where I am, but then want more. And so you cannot do both at the same time. However, we can spend time in our days and our weeks working on both. And so that's part of like I say, the process of practicing gratitude and kind of looking at things like positive affirmations and being like, I'm really capable. Like I squatted, I did this. Like we take it for granted that we can just do 15,000 steps in a day and go about our days the next day like nothing had happened, completely normal. And it's spending time like maybe in the morning focusing on that stuff, and then we go to work and being like, right, what are the structures that I need to put in place to then work towards my goals that I want to work towards? What is the steps, what are the structures that I have to place? But we still make time for, I am actually really strong, I am really in a positive place, but we also make time for kind of that idea of self-development. And that applies to everything. It applies to our training. It applies to our, like I say, professional careers.
Professional.
So yeah, that's the way that I would say is make time for both. Make time for both. And there's a fantastic podcast with Tim Ferriss.
And also, I think it's how, if you have to put it on a scale, how important is that fat loss to you, right? Because for me, for example, when I decided to make a change, that was kind of like, it became my priority. So that was, for me, was very important. So I was very committed to go all the way. Does it make sense?
Yeah,
Gabby. So if you said the fat loss is a long fat loss journey, I can't even talk.
Yeah.
It depends on how important it is for you that way. That weight loss.
And it's just understanding, like I say, the things that we spoke, like I say, we touched upon, that's going to be kind of undulating in the sense of like commitment to work and commitment to this. And sometimes it is about kind of reining things back in other areas of life, just to invest that bit more time, but just knowing that that's probably not representative of how we go about our day-to-day life. Like if you are doing, I can think about some clients now. I've got one client doing intermittent fasting. Like it's really, really working for them. It's really, really working for them. They're not massively enjoying it, but then can appreciate that this is serving them really, really well right now. And they are, and this isn't how the rest of their life's going to look, but it's a short-term intervention that's going to kind of get them to where they need to be. And then we rein it back in and look to build from there. And so there are, like I say, it's just finding that balance between unsustainable strategies and sustainable strategies. So yeah. Right, this is actually, I'm going to call it there because it's been our longest one yet, which has been fantastic. And I really appreciate all those engagement and all the rest of it. Thank you so much particularly to Sal for being so honest.
Yeah, you're welcome, guys.
Yeah,
Hope it's been helpful to you as well. And then maybe some of you can relate to, some of my and Callum's experience.
Yeah, for sure. And like I say, hope you guys have found it value. And then if you are about on Thursday, then we're going to touch upon scale weight even further. But thank you so much for you guys for listening, and we'll definitely see you guys next time.